Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. You inspired me. I'm going to pick up in the same vein because it's a beautiful Sabbath. I'm going to try to rain on this parade if I can. Just a little bit. We could use a little rain. Because I'd like to declare a state of emergency. I'm serious. Everybody's doing it. Why can't I do it? I want to do it. It's an emergency. It's not the climate. It's not a climate emergency. It's not a COVID emergency either. Not right now. It's not access to health care, if you'll pardon the expression, which I don't care for that expression. It's not a financial crisis, though. If you consider the economy and inflation and debt and all of those things put together, that's a good guess. The economy, that would have been a good guess. It's not geopolitics. That's not going so hot either, though. It's a moral emergency. We have a serious moral emergency. We have an identity crisis, as Dad was finishing up there. It's a problem. It's a problem in this country. It's a problem in the nations of Europe. It's a problem all over the world, really, in lots of different places. So, on that note, I want to talk about the first two commandments today. Boom, could you guess that? We're going to start in Exodus 20, verse 1. We'll talk about the first two commandments. Maybe I should have marked my page. That might have saved me a little bit of time getting here. I'll turn right to it. Why not? Here we go. Exodus 20, verse 1. And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me, number 1. And number 2, you shall not make unto you any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Now it stands to reason that if you're breaking the second one, you're also breaking the first one. But that's not necessarily always the case. You know, you can take the nation of India, right? Here we go. Second most populous nation in the world. Hinduism's main religion, right? It's overtly pagan. I don't think there's any pretense about that. They still love their traditions and their culture and all their stuff. And I don't think anybody's going to say it's not idolatry. It's obviously idolatry. I don't know how seriously they take their mythological type stories. I don't rightly know. And you know, they're not stupid people. You know, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of people over there. But when Indian expatriate communities are extremely successful and motivated and raise, you know, extremely talented children, like with a rate of success that is probably not equaled in the regular population or in many other, certainly not in many other minorities or anything like that. Those kids are motivated. Those people come over here. They work hard. That's why there's so many doctors and stuff like that. Overtly pagan, second most populous nation in the world. You could almost say the same thing about China, though they're more just atheist. You know, communism has that never mind deity flavor about it. They have their traditions and their morals, but communism doesn't really want anything taking your allegiance away from the state. So, you know, they're all in this together, and, you know, atheism and its freedom, you know, it's easy to foist that on a people and get them to go along with it. So that's pretty big problem, right? The two most populous nations in the world are not really godly. You couldn't say they're godly really in any way. Or if they have morals that resemble godliness, that's completely outside of that paradigm. Catholicism, there would be an example of breaking the second one maybe without breaking the first one. So you take God, you know, you have your traditions, you're trying to worship God and all this, but what do? You put a bunch of junk in the way. You just put it in the way, like that giant statue of the Apostle Peter, right? You know, there it is, a big gold, bronze, whatever statue. People go, what do? They prostrate themselves before it, they kiss it on the toe, and they're serving God, you know, with the whole heart. It's hard to say, like, isn't there something about that in here? You know, bowing yourself down before an image? I don't know. And it's not like that's the only one. You know, we published one of our issues of Watch magazine from some years ago. It had the Pope on the cover, and he's doing a procession. I think it's Easter. It's got the little disc. It's a representation of the sun, but it's supposed to be the sun, like the sun, not the sun. You know, it gets pretty confusing. Protestantism, I would say, is similar. You know, they've come out in degrees from Catholicism, but if you go over the various sects and denominations of it, a lot of the rigmarole is still in place. And so you could say, like the Church of England, for instance, right? It's not Catholic, but it might as well be. You know, they just said, no, the Pope is bad. You know, he appoints bishops, and they're taking the money away from Britain. So, you know, Henry VIII, the king, is going to be Pope now, and, you know, we'll appoint our own bishops and keep our income here. Boom. You know, it's not really it wasn't about many of the other issues that that other Protestant sects came out from, not at all. And as much as Christianity is embraced, mostly Protestantism in this country, you could say that with its most holy seasons, really the only aspects of what they teach that are widely embraced across the whole population are idolatry. They're idolatrous customs. They just slap Jesus' name over the top of it, right? So, average Joe Blow is not in church every Sunday, but, maybe on the C's and the E's, and even if they don't do that, they're excited about Christmas and getting some stuff, and even Easter's kind of fun. Depends on what's in your egg, I suppose, but they go along with it. It's an excuse to buy a nice, pretty dress and take photos. It's great, right? Everybody likes that stuff. The accoutrements. It's kind of ironic because really at the root of it, the Protestant movement is about choosing the Word of God over tradition. The revolution that came along with the printing press, with the average person being able to have access to one of these right here, to not having to go and hear it, because maybe you can't read, and you only get brief exposure, and you only get told what they want you to hear, right? But to be able to have it, to be able to read it, understand it, pray about it, do it on your own time, caused a huge revolution in world affairs. I don't think I need to stress that too much. And so Protestantism is really from saying, hey, wait, what tradition has done is contrary to what the Word says, even though they both espouse, If you talk to Christians, you'll usually hear that, the Bible is the absolute authority, and yet when you examine it line by line, the practice doesn't always add up. It doesn't always add up with that statement. And even when the origins of these traditions and many of the practices that are engaged in are admitted, they're not given up. It's excused. It's a not, that's not why I do it kind of attitude that comes out of it. So how does that make you feel, really? How does that make you feel? If we have the supposedly Christian nations, if the end time, like before the flood, is described as a rampantly sinful and lawless, and all this stuff is going on. So are the Christian nations acting as a restraint to God's wrath when the only parts of Christianity that are embraced generally are the pagan parts, or the parts that really have nothing to do with God, that don't have anything to do with this book right here, that come from entirely outside of that? What does it take to get you excited or to make you worry about things, about what's going on? There's so much sensationalism in the world that it's easy to tune it out or to turn it off and to just give yourself a break. But sometimes when you take a break, your break goes on a little longer than it should necessarily. It's easy to forget about it altogether. People are always trying to get at you. They're always trying to hit some nerve, elicit some emotional response, and not necessarily on a religious level or anything like that, just generally, just for, to get you to keep watching, to get you to participate in their organization, whatever it may be. You're always getting pinged and prodded, and you're trying to get a reaction out of you some way. Like, for instance, like the SPCA. Oh man, the SPCA runs some sad commercials. My daughter leaves the room when the SPCA commercial comes on, because they say, if you don't donate right now, this dog is gonna die. He is starving, he has no water. For only $19 a month, we could save him, but guess what? We're not going to until you send us $19. Okay, well, take it easy, man. Or, even St. Jude, which we've given money to St. Jude. I think that them treating children and stuff like that, it's a wonderful thing. I'm not dogging that in any way, but when you see children that are in those kinds of situations, who are struggling with cancer and other problems, I mean, it rips your heart out, and as well it should. But when you're constantly having your heart ripped out, when you're constantly being exposed and like emotionally taken up into this kind of thing, it makes it to where you're a little bit calloused, and you have to almost take a step back from it. You can't just let it eat you up all the time. How many murders, how many accidents, how many sad and sick and lonely people are you going to cry over every single day? Because a world is full of tragedy. It's full of tragedy, and we can be thankful and we can rejoice when it's not touching us personally, but you don't have to reach out very far to encounter someone who is struggling with something, and you can empathize and you can feel with them, but it's easy to get a little bit callous to it all about horrible things that happen in a way that's disconnected from your daily routine, or it doesn't touch you personally. I would say that world events in Bible prophecy are like that to a large extent. They can grind you down, keeping up with everything that's going on. It can wear you out. And, things often develop very, very slowly and gradually over a long period of time. And it can make it almost impossible to keep the sense of urgency about what you're seeing and what you're watching, because you think, you read, this is what's happening, this is what it said. It's like, oh no, this is terrible. But then it's still like that, and then it's still like that, and then it's still like that. And it's easy to think, well, maybe it's just going to go on like this for a really, really, really long time. And then there's no more urgency about what you're doing, about your own actions, about how you're conducting yourselves or what you're sharing with others. It's like the 10 virgins in Matthew 25, 5 wise ones, 5 foolish ones, but they're all sleepy. They all went to sleep. The only difference was that the wise ones had what they needed when the time finally came around, and they came through in the end. But waiting is hard work. Waiting through all this, living through all this, if you care, if you see where it's going, if you care at all, it's hard work. It's hard to keep it. It's hard to keep it all on your shoulders and keep going, especially when it goes slow. But it put it in perspective. I was surprised at how much of what I'm going to talk about Dad touched on today, but I took the state of emergency thing from something he said yesterday or the day before, so there. I stole it. Put it in perspective. You live life, you go to work, wears you out, you do chores, you got to keep everything clean, otherwise you can't walk on the floor in your bare feet, it's disgusting. You have your family to take care of, spend time with your spouse. Your kids are going to take up your time. Even if you try to ignore them, you're not going to be able to. I don't ignore my children, let me put that out there. But they're going to get your attention one way or the other. Your extended family and parents, grandparents, hang out with your favorite cousins. You're going to have time for everybody, for all the people that you care about. If you want to maintain relationships, you're going to take care of your dog. He's needy. My dog wants to go out. I know about it. He wants to come back in. I know about that too. He wants to walk. He's got things to do. You rest on the Sabbath. I'm glad for that, because often, if it weren't the Sabbath, if I weren't commanded to rest on that day, I would do some dishes or, take on some project I'd been putting off, and I don't need that. I need a day where I don't do that. That's not the day. It's not the day for those things. It's not the day for your chores and your projects and all the rest of your garbage that you have to keep up with every day. You watch the news, you try to keep up. It's all biased. It's all biased. You just have to sort out which way the bias is coming from and how biased is it and how far do you trust that person. Do they have an agenda? Do they just want you to click on something? You're exposed to the most outrageous lies all day long on the internet in advertisements, and that stuff is not true, and all they want you to do is go, click, because they made their fraction of a cent, and that's all it's good for. It doesn't have anything to do with the truth, and so, perusing headlines or get a secondhand stuff, that's tough, then you got to sort it all out if you want to actually know what's going on, and so it's like you burned your time in the first place. There's crime and political intrigue. There's emergency after emergency, and time flies by very, very quickly. Poof, the summer's over. Summer's almost over. I just heard, school starts in 3 weeks. Like, what? Where did that go, Poof, you're middle-aged. Oh no, oh no. Poof, you're old. Yeah. Laugh at that one. You could see what's going wrong in the world, and you hope, maybe we have some hope that things can get better, that there can be a reprise from time to time. But living it day to day, it doesn't have the same impact as looking back over a large chunk of time and seeing how things have progressed. There was this news story just this last week, the lady that was in the coma for 2 years. She was out. She took a 2-year nap. Can you imagine sleeping through 2 years? It's a long time. I would have slept through COVID if I had a chance. I just sleep right through that whole crisis, which she pretty much did, right? She slept 2 years. She slept through the last election. That was kind of a big deal, all right? Unprecedented spending in the world today. Unprecedented spending. The Ukraine, you'd wake up and you say, Russia's attacking Ukraine. It seems kind of important after 2 years. What about 20 years? What if you go back 20 years? Dad mentioned my grandfather died in 2003. It's slightly less than 20 years. What would, if he woke up and got a report on everything that had transpired from the time that he died until right now, he was a pretty calm dude, but I think he would be freaking out. He'd be freaking out over what had happened in the last 20 years. I remember very clearly in 2000 or 2001 or so, it was before we were in this building, that he was mad that Texas had repealed their anti-sodomy laws. Sodomy was illegal in Texas until 01 or 02, something around there, right? He was mad because, here you open the floodgates. And now, what's cool now? Oh, you got to ask for my pronouns. You can't just walk up and call somebody sir, ma'am, or his and her, or any of that. You better ask first. That would be... It's like a joke. Do you remember Monty Python, The Meaning of Life? In the beginning, in the hospital, which there's a lot of funny stuff in there, oh my goodness. But the baby's born, and the one doctor says, "It's a boy." And the other doctor says, "Isn't it a little early to be assigning roles?" It's like, that was a joke. That's a joke. Well, it's not as much of a joke as it was then. It's kind of funny that was in the wings already. At any rate, moral standards, I'd say moral standards have come way, way, way down. And I know that once upon a time, people were mad about Elvis and the Beatles and their suggestive lyrics and stuff like that. And when I think about that rationally, I can see it's a slippery slope, right? You can slide down. I like music. I like to listen to the radio from time to time. I like pop music. I like rap a little bit. I'm sorry, it's mostly bad. It's mostly really bad. But I got to tell you that the stuff that you can hear on the radio now, when you're a kid and you listen to it, oftentimes you don't even know what the words are saying. You don't even know what they're saying up there. You figure it out sometimes. And when you do, sometimes it's a little alarming what they're saying, because the music on the radio now is pretty graphic. I mean, it's pretty much explicit, step by step, homosexual pornography, if you will. And if you doubt me, listen to the top 20 songs that are coming out. It's for real. It's for real. And they're not even that catchy. Oh my goodness. It's insult to injury. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, that was kind of a big deal. We didn't come out of that looking so hot. And that's a sad thing. That hurts me personally. A lot of my contemporaries were, involved personally over there, and lost friends and people, and the expenditure and the humiliation that we end up leaving with, and the situation is not much better than it was before we went in, and that's tragic because our young men, out of patriotism, we spend our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor over there to establish a democracy or a republic in Iraq or in Afghanistan, and then today, it might as well not even have happened. Nobody wants to talk much about the news that comes out of those countries right now. You know why? It's bad. It does bad. It's all bad. It makes us look bad. It's just bad. Iran's nuclear ambition, that would be a big deal. Iran's nuclear ambitions would be a very big deal, something that has changed. The Abraham Accords, with the United States recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, huge. That's a huge development that's happened. And now, relations are normalizing between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Civilian flights are allowed, and, things are progressing over there. Really, the threat of Iran is pushing a lot of countries who are uneasy with Israel. They're pushing them into an uneasy alliance because, we're committed to not letting Iran have a nuclear weapon. But please get back in the deal that has been so far blown past it's completely irrelevant at that point in time. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense at all, actually. Brexit, that's a huge deal. Germany on top, and Europe again, leading the way, the strongest economy at the front of the European Union, big deal, huge deal. The rise of China wasn't that much in 2003. They're not what they were. They're a lot more now than they were then. All right, it's and growing and aggressive and all that. Russian aggression, the fact that Russia is pretty much doing what they want over there in their former Soviet brethren's states, I suppose, and that's a big deal in Europe. It's over there for us, but it's very close to home, and it's part of recent history even for them. I heard a sermon that he gave in 1992. I think it's the one that we're offering in this next letter, and the Soviet Union had just fallen apart, and it was like, wow. The world changed, and he said something about the United States enjoying a brief time in the sun as the world's premier power. And that's continued from then until now, pretty much. But there's serious threats to that now and on the way. Oh, the virtual surveillance state. I love that one. That just went right by, and how cool gadgets are and how nice it is to be able to look up where you're going. I need to get, it's going to tell me turn by turn, my location's on. Oh, wait, they know where you are all the time, everywhere you go. They hear everything you say, every message you send is accessible. You know, that you can turn on the camera remotely and record your whole life. Big deal, huge deal. 1984's got nothing on cell phones. A screen, no. It's in your pocket. You take it with you. COVID authority, the kind of power that has been assumed in that guise in the United States, in Europe, that's unreal. That's unreal. If you jumped from 20 years ago to today, you would say it is an emergency. It's an emergency. Just doesn't always feel that urgent when you take it a day at a time. Few of us even think about it that way, and even if you do objectively think about it that way, you do get immune to it. Where is God in all of this, in the way things are going? I would ask, who's seeking God's will? Who's searching his word for direction, for answers, for the way to live? You could say nobody in power, right? Nobody in a position of power, or at least almost nobody. You might be able to find a few individuals here and there, but they're definitely the minority. I would like to read Ezekiel chapter 22, starting in verse 17. Ezekiel 22. Starting in verse 17, "And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, the house of Israel is to me become dross. All they are brass and tin and iron and lead in the midst of the furnace. They are even the dross of silver. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, because you are all become dross, behold, therefore I will gather you into the midst of Jerusalem." My margin for dross says waste material, right? The dross is not the part of the metal that you want to keep when you're refining it. "As they gather silver and brass and iron and lead and tin into the midst of the furnace to blow the fire upon it, to melt it, so will I gather you in my anger and in my fury, and I will leave you there and melt you. Yea, I will gather you and blow upon you the fire of my wrath, and you shall be melted in the midst thereof. As silver is melted in the midst of the furnace, so shall you be melted in the midst thereof, and you shall know that I, the Lord, have poured out my fury upon you." Continuing into verse 23. Let's see here. "And the word of the Lord again came to me, saying, Son of man, say unto her, You are the land that is not cleansed, nor rained upon in the day of indignation. There is a conspiracy of her prophets in the midst of her, like a roaring lion ravening the prey. They have devoured souls. They have taken the treasure and precious things. They have made her many widows in the midst thereof. Her priests have violated my law, and have profaned mine holy things. They have put no difference between the holy and the profane, neither have they showed difference between the unclean and the clean, and have hid their eyes from my Sabbaths, and I am profaned among them. Her princes in the midst thereof are like wolves ravening the prey, to shed blood and to destroy souls, to get dishonest gain. And her prophets have daubed them with untempered mortar, seeing vanity and divining lies unto them, saying, Thus saith the Lord God, when the Lord has not spoken. The people of the land have used oppression and exercised robbery, and have vexed the poor and needy. Yea, they have oppressed the stranger wrongfully. And I sought for a man among them that should make up the hedge, and stand in the gap before me for the land, that I should not destroy it, but I found none. Therefore have I poured out mine indignation upon them. I have consumed them with the fire of my wrath. Their own way have I recompensed upon their heads, says the Lord God. Pretty strong words, right? That's pretty tough stuff. The week before last, I did our shopping at Brookshire's down here for the Sabbath, and you got bag boys and things like that. It's rather, old-fashioned experience, I guess. Somebody helps you out with your things. Kid's name was Jonah, so I asked if anybody let him go in a boat with them. He didn't get it. And then I explained, and he said, his family had almost named them Noah. And I was like, it's another boat story. He didn't know that either. But he had a chip on his shoulder about religion, because his grandma, I guess, had been on him about who knows what. He was, he had those big discs in his ear, right? She probably had plenty to say to him. Who knows? He was pretty outspoken, and he told me, this is exactly what he told me. He said, anybody that believes the Bible is out of touch with reality. Out of touch with reality. You believe the Bible, you're out of touch with reality. I don't think he's ever read it or understood it, maybe. Maybe that's part of the problem. Because what's amazing about the Bible is, there's a lot of history and there's a lot of prophecy. There's a lot of other stuff in there, but the bulk of what it deals with is human interaction, like how you're supposed to treat one another, how you're supposed to live your life, how you're supposed to deal with God. And that's relevant in all ages. It's relevant in every single age. You can read through the parts of this that deal with human nature and human interaction and stuff, and you can say, yeah, that's happened to me. Like, I worked with a guy like that. You can relate 100% to the situations that are in there. And it's sad that is lost. It's sad that is lost on people that think it's just an antiquated, book for, telling me my ears look stupid or not to go out and party, those things like that. The truly relatable parts are missed in that, Just all you preach is accept Jesus or go to hell. It's like the billboard. People that aren't interested, that doesn't do a lick of good. It's not going to change anybody's mind by putting that on a big billboard. Only if they're inclined that way a little bit to begin with. Do you think people have time for God, in light of everything else that's going on and all their own worries and concerns and work and family? You think people truly have time for God, not just on Christmas and Easter? First and second commandment, that there are no gods before him, that no commitment is more important than your relationship with God, that there are no idols, no graven images, nothing that you worship in place of God, even. Even most religious people want God on their own terms, like we've talked about a little bit already today. Like Isaiah says in chapter 29, verse 13, this people draw near me with their mouth, and with their lips they do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. Can you teach the fear of God through the precepts of men? Not so much. We've talked about that some already today, haven't we? We had a garage sale a while back, and the preacher from the Methodist church that our property backs up to came over here. And she told us that if we wanted to, we could donate all our leftovers to their rummage sale. Well, that's considerate. And, welcomed us to come by, anytime we like. And, they have a big banner in front of their church. And it says in letters composed of stripes of different colors, and it almost fuzzes out when you look at it. And it came up, I think they put it up right about the beginning of June. And it says, "You are welcome." Maybe I'd like to go see what that's about. There was a big split in the Methodist Church a couple years ago. I don't know if you remember that. They had a big council, and it was about homosexuality and serving in being priests and preachers and all that stuff, and it didn't go well. It split them. And it wasn't the American and European bishops who resisted it. It was not. It was not them. Let me tell you that. Are Christians standing in the gap to restrain God's wrath? If we're happy that there are a certain number of Christians out there, are they fulfilling the role we would like them to fulfill? Are we fulfilling the role? Because things that happen in your life, stuff comes up, you got to take care of it your own way. Well, you just have to compromise from time to time. Events that come along, social pressures have always served to come between God and man. We're going to go back to some early Bible history, skim over a lot of this. God chose Abraham because he obeyed him, right? He believed God. He was tested. He passed his test. It was great. God chose Isaac, not Ishmael, who was the result of Abraham and Sarah trying to accomplish God's will their own way. It didn't turn out that good. He didn't choose any of the children that he had with Keturah after Sarah died. Isaac's children, he didn't pick Esau, did he? I like lentil soup as much as the next guy, but you got to be really hungry to trade your birthright for a bowl of lentils. It is good, and it's healthy too. I do like lentil soup, actually. That's not the point. God chose Jacob, right? And even though maybe he listened to his mother and he went about trying to get it in the wrong way, he dressed up like his brother because Isaac was blind at that point in time. So he put on some goat skin and said, "It's me, Esau," so he would get the best blessing. And Isaac touched him and he's like, "Yeah, the goat skin. Yeah, that's Esau. It feels just like my son." That's funny. He put on some goat skin. It's just like him. He was an hairy man, I guess. But God really paid him out for tricking his father, right? He got tricked. He went off to get a wife. He got tricked. He became an unwilling polygamist. He was fleeing. He thought his brother was going to kill him. His brother was mad. It was widely circulated that he was going to kill him. So his mother convinced Isaac to send him away to get a wife. He said, I don't want him taking a wife out of these Canaanites. Send him back to my family to get a wife. We're going to pick that up in Genesis 28. Genesis chapter 28, verse 11. And he lighted upon a certain place, he stopped there, and tarried there all night because the sun was set. And he took of the stones of that place and put them for his pillows and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, where are we here? Through 22. Oh, through the end. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven, and behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. Verse 13 of Genesis 28. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham your father and the God of Isaac. The land where you lie, to you I will give it, and to your seed. And your seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in thee and in your seed shall all families of the earth be blessed. And behold, I am with you and will keep you in all places wherever you go, and will bring you again into this land. For I will not leave you until I have spoken till I have done that which I have spoken of to thee. Till I have done that which I have spoken to thee of. To thee of. Verse 16, and Jacob awaked out of his sleep, and he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. And he was afraid and said, how dreadful is this place? This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. And Jacob rose up early in the morning and took the stone that he had put for his pillows and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on the top of it. And he called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of that city was called Luz at first. And Jacob vowed a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God. And this stone, which I have set for a pillar, shall be God's house. And of all that you shall give me, I will surely give a tenth unto you. Bethel is north of Jerusalem, just a little bit, not a super duper far away, just a little bit north. He committed to God right then, the vision that he had seen. He committed to God and made an agreement. God blessed him, and he said, please God, fulfill it, and I'll serve you, I'll tithe to you. He's going to serve him, right? So he goes on for a wife, but father-in-law Laban, he didn't treat him very good. God blessed him in spite of it. Laban was constantly changing his wages, if you will. That was his complaint. He would say, well, if the goats come out this way, then they're yours. If not, they're mine. Well, they come out that way. And then the other way around. And he knew what he was doing anyway, breeding animals, being out there with them all the time, but he kept being changed. He was tricked. He wanted the one daughter, and it surprised him, and so he ended up there an extra 7 years. By the time the whole thing is done, he's a rich dude. He has great possessions. He has, I think, 11 children at that point in time, and the rest of Laban's relatives are a little bit mad. They think that he has robbed them pretty much because he has prospered in spite of what they tried to do to him. They feel like they are, they've been taken. They're aggrieved. So he fled. He just ran away in the night because he thought, well, if I go to leave, he's going to keep all this stuff. He's going to keep my wives and my kids and everybody. And so he takes off in the middle of the night and runs away. And Rachel, his wife, the mother of Joseph, which is important, stole Laban's gods. She took them with her. She went ahead and she snatched his idols, and they ran off with those too. Laban catches up. Jacob doesn't know that she stole the idols. She hides them in a trunk and sits on it and says that she can't get up because she's after the custom of women. And, Laban doesn't find his idols anywhere when he looks for them. And then Jacob's mad, and he said in the first place, whoever you find them with, let them die. I didn't take them. I didn't tell anybody to steal your idols. Let them die. And then he's mad, and, why have you chased me out? So on and so forth. They made peace, and they put a pillar up, and that neither of them would cross it in anger to the other one, another pillar. So he's headed back home, and he's terrified to meet his brother. What he said when he initially left was that if you bring me again to my father's home in peace. Well, there he is. He's very wealthy, and he's about to get back, but he's afraid there's not going to be peace when he gets back. He's scared to meet Esau. So he sends all these presents, hundreds and hundreds of animals ahead as a present to pacify his brother. And we're going to pick up right there in Genesis 32, verse 21, before he himself goes, or the people that are most dear to him, himself and his favorite wife and his real wives and his children, keeps them for last, sends all the presents, sends everybody else over first. Genesis 32, verse 21. So went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. And he rose up that night, and took his 2 wives, and his 2 woman servants, and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them, and sent them over the brook, and sent over that he had. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, against Jacob that is, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint, as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaks. And Jacob said, I will not let you go, except you bless me. And then he said unto him, What is your name? And he replied, Jacob. Then he said, Your name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince you have prevailed, you have power with God, and with men you have prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me, I pray you, your name. And he said, Wherefore is it that you do ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel. He said, For I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. It's a pretty big, important story in the grand scheme of things. His name was changed to Israel, but we're going to keep going on. He's made this agreement with God. He's gone away. He's been blessed entirely. He's come back with his wives, with all his possessions, and what's in his possession. His wife has a whole bunch of idols with them still. So we're going to pick up the story in Genesis 35, verses 1 through 4. And God said unto Jacob, Arise, go up to Bethel, where he made the first pillar, where Jacob's ladder, as they call it, the dream came to him, and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God, that appeared unto you when you fled from the face of Esau your brother. Then Jacob said unto his household, and to all that were with him, Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments, and let us arise, and go up to Bethel. And I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. I just think that's really interesting that here, Jacob, Israel, right, his favorite wife, this innermost circle, the mother of his son Joseph, right? What does she take? She takes the idols of her father and brings them with them when they leave there. You remember where Abraham was from? Ur of the Chaldees. The Chaldeans were an integral part of Babylon. You're not going to talk about Babylon without Chaldeans being involved in it. It'd be like talking about the American Revolution without Massachusetts or Virginia or something like that. It's an important part. Important people came from there. That's where Abraham was from. That's where Isaac's wife came from. They went back to his own people to get his wife. That's where Jacob's wives were from. And we have documented here that they took idols with them from there. Why? To break them? No, I don't think so. Those girls, if Laban was serving idols, those girls grew up serving those idols too. Jacob's there working for years and years. All of those children are born and reared in that environment. You think they're with him out in the field the entire time, little kids? Maybe the oldest one is 14, 15 at that point in time. No, they're back there at home with their mothers, probably around Laban. What are they going to do? They're going to serve idols. It's wrapped up right in it. Babylonian idols. I think that's significant considering certain traditions that are still with us today, because Israel has been plagued with idolatry from the very start. It has been a problem. It has been something that is present and that should be put away. Obviously, Jacob knew that. Like, here we go. We're going before God. Hide all this stuff. Get it out of here. We can't go in front of him with that. So it's really not surprising that elements of Babylonian religion are still worshipped to this day. The problem goes back farther than that. It goes back all the way, I would say. Even Adam and Eve in the garden. Serpent slithers along. Just going to read a couple verses here in Genesis 3. Genesis 3, verse 4, And the serpent said unto the woman, You shall not surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. You're going to be like God. Is that not where we are today? People think they know good and evil. You're going to decide what's right and what's wrong for yourself. You're just going to, outside of God's judgment, you're just going to rewrite the rules in some different way. The theory of evolution would contend that we are the highest form of life, at least on this planet. But without God, morality is entirely subjective. Nothing's absolute. It's all opinion, point of view, except nobody really believes that. Even the people that would want to phrase it that way, it's part of an agenda. It's the first step in an agenda to redefine good and evil. It's just about putting it on their terms, about putting it on what's convenient, whatever type of morality you would prefer to enforce. Because I don't think you're going to get anybody who says there are no morals, not zero, that there are no absolutes. Even if this is what you reject, there's something like, oh, you can't cross that line no matter what. That's evil. That's terrible to cross that line. That's not the right line, though. It's not the line that God drew. One of the big problems with evolution, among many, right, is that it starts with a fully functioning universe. So the larger question is entirely avoided. You start evolving. Here you are on the earth, revolving around the sun with laws, seasons, tides, all these different materials. Oh, it's just there. We'll start there. That answers all the questions. No, it completely avoids the biggest question. And, the whole idea of forced adaptation, these animals had to change in these ways to survive. There's no evidence of that, all right? Woodpeckers eat at my bird feeder. He doesn't need a tongue that wraps all the way around the back of his head so that he can pick up grasshoppers and eat things like regular birds do. It just didn't happen that way. And there are plenty of species out there. They say the fossil record, and, they just got a fossil of this animal, and it's hundreds of millions of years old. Well, wait, there's the same animal right over there. It hasn't changed at all. Zero. Zero changes. So everything else just went on, and he was fine the way he was. Perfection, This is just be a really happy amoeba with no back pain. What is it? There's no need. There's nothing to force you to progress beyond that. So, if we're the smartest beings around, then we're in really big trouble. We're in really big trouble. I speak for myself as well. You think we have a climate crisis right now? Earth worship is not a new concept. There are well-documented historical fluctuations in the temperatures on Earth that don't have anything to do with internal combustion. We have to admit that some things are out of our control. Ice age, no ice age. I think it was in the 19th century or so that like 90% of the ivory in the world came from woolly mammoths that were flash frozen in northern Russia with their mouths full of green food, and they would dig them out of the ice and they would cut their tusks off, and that's where all the ivory came from for piano keys when that was a luxurious or a normal thing for people to have in their homes. They're just standing around eating and poof, they're covered in ice. That's some climate change. It doesn't have anything to do with your car or my car. Problem is we have agenda-driven studies, averaging temperatures across the most critical areas. I read one a year or so ago. It talked about how the worst warming in the world is happening all across the Arctic up there. The problem is it's so cold that they can't actually go up there to measure the temperature in person. And so they take the temperature on like the Pacific, and then they take the temperature on the Atlantic and a couple other stations along the way, and they average it out over the whole thing. And they say, aha, this is where the warming is most severe. Really? It's like it was too cold, you couldn't even go there. All right, I thought that was funny. I think you're taking a pretty big step on faith there, that it's the same across the entire breadth of northern Canada. Larger natural causes are ignored: solar flare, solar activity, Earth's elliptical orbit, the orbit of our solar system inside of the galaxy. I contend that there are things that we don't really understand. There's these new pictures coming out from the satellite, and they're mind-blowing. Tell you what, we don't really understand everything that's going on out there. Not even close. There's leap seconds. Have you heard of leap seconds? Earth's rotation gets slightly slower all the time. It's getting slower and slower and slower. And so since they came up with atomic clocks, which are, they're not going to go out of step, they realized that all the rest of mechanical clocks get thrown out. And so I think seven or 8 times, I heard this on Earth Day or Skywatch or whatever comes on QXFM, they've had to add like 7 leap seconds since 1950. Now that's not much, but over a really long time, like maybe the Earth spinning, slowing down has something to do with something. Maybe, right? There's a certain obviousness to, be green and all this stuff. There are certain obvious things. More trees are better than less trees. Yeah, they are. More trees are better than less trees. Pollution is bad. I don't like it when there's a bunch of plastic bottles in the lake. That's a pain. Throw your stuff away. Sure. Cities are gross. It's totally true. Cities are gross. Have you been to one? They're disgusting. People are mucking up that area. They're really mucking up. Cities formed around the most wonderful, fertile places with the most fresh water, and so we piled in there, covered it in concrete, and, you screwed it up. You screwed up those square acres anyway. All that's true, but that's not evidence of the larger narrative exactly. Because if you think that the entire power grid is going to be renewable by 2040 or whatever it is, and we're all going to drive electric cars at the same time, it's gullible. That's not going to happen. They might say they want to do it. They're not going to do it because it's not going to work. It doesn't make sense. Like this bill, Manchin killed their radical climate change bill, Maybe a lot of the rest of them voted for it because they knew it wasn't going to pass anyway. There is the potential for that. I read a quote by, what's his name, Podesta, John Podesta, maybe? He was Hillary's campaign manager, old cabbage sniffer himself. Podesta, he said that Manchin had, single-handedly doomed the fate of the entire planet. Now, that's a little harsh, I think they're going to try to primary him or something like that, right? Because it comes down to power and control, and it's about far more than the planet or than the concerns that it appears to be about in the end. Look at the Netherlands. Dad's been talking about the Netherlands. Farmers in Holland, they're mad. They're protesting. They got their tractors, right? Because in the Netherlands, in order to meet the EU green targets, they've decided they're going to cut down on their farm animals. I think it's 25%. They got to thin their herds by 25%. So they want to get rid of cows. They want to get rid of cows. Edible fertilizer-making factories that mow your lawn for you. Get rid of them. They make milk. They make leather. No, get rid of the cows. It's the... Farmers, okay, the reason they're picking on farmers in the Netherlands is because they are not the constituents of Mr. Rutt's government. They don't vote for him anyway. So if he picks on the farmers, who cares? He's not losing any votes over that. His people aren't farmers. Farmers vote for the other guy. So why not pick on the farmers? He could pick on something else to meet their targets, but no, they singled out this group because he's the opposition. That's what it's about. It's about getting power over your enemies. He could have, why not dogs? Why not get rid of dogs? You can't have dogs anymore. Dog is a relatively useless animal. Makes you feel good at night. I don't know. Maybe makes you feel safe from time to time. But think of all the emissions involved in producing kibble. People can't have their therapy pets in their restaurant anymore. Just get rid of all the dogs. Most people don't want to eat them when it comes down to it anyway. So why cows? There's way more dogs. You get a flea poison, they're flatulent too, Come over to my house. Hank will show you. You'll know. If you want to save the planet, you should try doing things God's way, right? Maybe try that for a change. If you want to save this planet, when is the land going to have its Sabbath? When's that? Is that coming up sometime soon? When are we going to stop eating all of the filter feeders out of the ocean that exist to clean the water? Maybe that would be a good step. It's sad that when the times of trouble come, when things get serious and there's drought, famine, and pestilence and all that, it's going to look a lot like climate change, See how that's going to... So if the weather, things start spiraling out of control, they're going to say, look, we need more power so we can address this. It's not good. How about the COVID crisis, right? COVID crisis. Whatever you may think about the virus itself, the response seized power over people in a way that is far scarier and more significant than the disease itself in the long term. The shocking amount of power. And it's not even over. It's still going on. My grandmother, Pierrette Reisner, lives in a nursing home now, which she likes. I'm surprised. She gets along real good there. And she has COVID. She's not real sick or anything. We were down there last week. Can I see my grandmother? No. Could I go get her out of there if I wanted to? No. You're cut off. Somebody has authority. You're not doing that. You're not getting at your own family. There's all kinds of things you can't do. Can't go in public, can't go to church, can't shop, can't work a lot of places unless you jump through all the right hoops. Maybe you're willing to, maybe not. That's your business. It's not my business. You got to make your own decisions. You got to work. People got to eat. You got to feed your families. You got to service your debt. You got all kinds of things you have to do. But the government taking that kind of power, just boom, it's an emergency, take that kind of power. That's some end-time stuff. That's some serious, serious stuff. And there was a reason that was legitimate enough to stop people from just storming in the streets and rejecting it all, apparently, because they got away with it. It's done. We're through it. They're going to do it again. They're already doing it again a little bit. That's what republics and democracies were supposed to take us away from the unlimited, arbitrary despotism. That's the whole idea of voting and have somebody that represents you. It's the idea of the rule of law, like in the Bible, where not even the priest or the king was exempt. We have equality. In the law, we have equality. Everybody is held to the same kind of standard. As long as those ideals prevail, then we're sort of prevented. We're kind of held back from the situation that we read about in the end of the world. But obviously, we've seen take it, give it back. You're free. You're still free, right? Most of the time, you're still free. You have limited autonomy. There's a healthcare crisis. I don't like this one. So I've been 18. I had friends that did that. I didn't have the guts to tell them that that's a bad idea or that's wrong. I didn't even think so at the time. It's consenting. You might as well stand by and hold the clothes while they stone somebody. It's the same. It's the same thing. That goes on. There's this horrible story about the 10-year-old girl, right? That's all over the place. It's still all over the place. It's sickening. It's multiple tragedies. Look at how it's being cast. We have to be able to abort babies so that when little girls get raped, they don't have to carry the children. That's the big solution. That's aiming kind of low. I think that there might be a different problem that we should try to deal with first. But like a lot of the rest of healthcare, no offense, there's a lot of wonderful things that people can do, but there tends to be there's a tendency to treat the symptom rather than curing the disease. Abortion access in this instance is treating a symptom. I'm going to wrap the financial crisis and geopolitics together. Because the economic situation of the United States, its allies, Europe, it's beyond my comprehension. I don't understand. I know why they don't want it to collapse, but how it keeps going, how it's going to keep going, it eludes me. The major economies of the world are so interconnected that, we're all in this together. Yay. It's true, right? They can't just let people start falling out, right? That's why the IMF is going to bail out Sri Lanka. You can't just start letting things go. Somebody's going to be writing that off. That's not technically an asset anymore, because guess what? They're upside down. The pretense of solvency keeps getting pushed back because there's so many more important things to deal with. COVID, Russia, maybe an environmental emergency, all kinds of things we got to deal with first. Russia is a problem. We shouldn't forget that World War II pretty much kicked off because the Nazis had a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union, and so they pretty much divided Poland. Britain came in against the Nazis. Russia went on to take the Baltic states. Nobody was going to do anything about that. They were at war with Finland. That's where the term Molotov cocktail comes from. Hooray. I think he was their foreign minister or something like that, so they'd throw gas on the Russian tanks. It's a Molotov cocktail, right? If Germany hadn't turned on Russia, things might look a little bit different than they do today, because they were only allies in an enemy of my enemy kind of situation. By the time World War II was over, we had met them in Berlin. They kept all the territory that they overran. They didn't give any of that back. They didn't help them restore their own countries. There was nothing like that. Iron Curtain came down. That's the Soviet Union. We're still suffering from that. There's still fallout from that. They've been set way back, but nobody wants to stay down forever. I remember General Patton, a quote from General Patton saying that we should have gone on and beat the crap out of them right then and there while we had the men and the equipment and all that. It's already over there. It's in place. Just go ahead and fight Russia then. He felt like it was only delaying it, that it was going to happen eventually. It hasn't happened yet. If it does, it's not going to be pretty. But are we projecting strength in world affairs? Is Europe projecting strength? Because it feels like this conflict started when everybody looked particularly weak, at a particularly weak point in time. We're going to sanction our way to victory, right? Our president's been traveling. He's been in Saudi Arabia to ask them to increase oil production. Saudi Arabia obviously produces a lot of oil. They actually generate a lot of their electricity by burning oil. So we sanction Russia, but Saudi Arabia still buys oil from Russia, but it's of a lower quality, so they burn it to generate power. That frees up more of their own production to sell on the world market at a higher price. So I guess the question is, are we or are we not funding Russian oil production? I mean, it's a step removed, but are we really cutting it off? Are you getting rid of it? You're going to bring them to their knees that way? Well, we'll see. If nothing else comes from this conflict, then waking Europe up from its pacifist, utopian daydream, then it'll still be a big freaking deal. All right, and that's already happened. I mean, Europe is already like, oh no, they're reneging on some of their green equipment commitments because they realize we have to be able to produce our own electricity. Like, we need to be able to take care of ourselves and defend ourselves, and that's a change from what's been the status quo over there for a long time. I'd like to read Isaiah chapter 10, starting in verse 1. Went way too far. Isaiah chapter 10, verse 1. Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed, to turn aside the needy from judgment, and to take away the right of the poor from my people, that widows may be their prey, and that they may rob the fatherless. When everything gets so expensive that the widows and the fatherless and the least fortunate people they're really nowhere to turn, they're going to say, we give you whatever power you want, just fix it. All right? That's taking advantage. That's oppressing them. That's doing them dirty. And what will you do, verse 3, what will you do in the day of visitation, and in the desolation which shall come from far? To whom will you flee for help, and where will you leave your glory? Without me they shall bow down under the prisoners, and they shall fall under the slain. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. Verse 5, O Assyrian, the rod of mine anger, and the staff in their hand is my indignation. I will send him against an hypocritical nation, and against the people of my wrath will I give him a charge, to take the spoil, and to take the prey, and to tread them down like the mire of the streets. Howbeit he meaneth not so, neither does his heart think so, but it is his heart to destroy and cut off nations, not a few. For he said, Are not my princes altogether kings? Is not Calno as Carchemish? Is not Hamath as Arpad? Is not Samaria as Damascus? As my hand has found the kingdoms of the idols, and whose graven images did excel them of Jerusalem and of Samaria, shall I not, as I have done unto Samaria and her idols, so do to Jerusalem and her idols? What comes before God? What are we worshiping in the place of the Almighty? Because it can't be anything, not if we're going to be the ones who are going to stand in the gap. It's not the prosperity of the bronze bull of Wall Street. That's not guaranteed, is it? It's not good health. Paul had a problem. He asked for healing. The answer was no. I read 2 Corinthians 12, verse 7. And lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations, there was given unto me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan, to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, that it might depart from me. And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. You can't think that if you're sick, if we're plagued with disease, as much as we're in the world, we're going to be exposed to the things that are going around in the world. You just can't let something like that, some problem, shake your faith. Nothing can come before him. Our obligation to him and to his judgments. not our desire for our country to succeed or prevail, because it can only happen the right way. It's not going to happen the wrong way. We're not just going to do everything wrong and then prevail and succeed and be blessed. That's not the way it goes down. Christ came to a nation that was under bondage to a foreign power. When a soldier can say, carry this, you're coming with me right now. When your own rulers have to ask permission to execute somebody, you're not in charge. We can't trust to our own understanding. The last scripture I'm going to read, 1 Corinthians 13, verse 8. First Corinthians 13, starting in verse 8, charity never fails, love. But whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is part shall be done away. There's a lot that's going to be done away in the world, but it's not the truth. It's not justice or love or mercy. Certainly not God's eternal judgments, but we don't make the rules in this life. We don't get to make them. If the world can't come to grips with that, then we are truly in a state of emergency.